Good afternoon. My name is Andries du Toit from the Institute for Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies at the University of the Western Cape. And it is my pleasure to welcome you all to our second webinar here on the challenges and issues facing those trying to survive at the margins of the capitalist economy in Southern Africa in the time of the coronavirus. We're very excited to have with us here three really fabulous guests. The one is Luyanda Hlatswayo of the African Reclaimers Organization. Luyanda is based in Soweto, and African Reclaimers is an organization representing the interests of waste pickers and waste collectors who have really been at the front end of some of the most difficult issues people are experiencing in this time. Also on the panel is Professor Imraan Valodia of the Faculty of Commerce, Law and Management at the University of Witwatersrand, and Lynette Maart, National Director of the Black Sash. It's really great to have you here. As it's customary, we're just starting off, but we will ask each of you to talk briefly to the concrete issues facing people in the informal sector in this time of the coronavirus. You'll each, I think we'll spend about 10 minutes with each of you, and then we will go to comments and questions. Listeners, please feel free to add your comments and questions in the comment box on the YouTube screen, and we'll try to deal with as many of them as we can before we stop at 2 o'clock sharp. Our one guest, Luyanda Hlatswayo, has been experiencing some technical difficulties. Luyanda, are you able to join us at this point? I know that you were having some difficulties with your computer. I don't hear anything from Luyanda, so we're going to go then to Prof Valodia. Imraan, it's been one of the most noticeable features of this lockdown in South Africa that in a way, although people in the middle class and even the core working class have been experiencing significant inconvenience and even hardship, it's really the people in the informal sector who have been suffering. It seems to be a situation where the formal economy sneezes, the informal economy catches cold. Can you explain to us a little bit more about just what the sources of the vulnerability of people in the informal sector are, and why is this hitting people so hard?
So, I mean, from what we know about kind of how those who operate in the informal economy run their enterprises, I think we're kind of quite aware that what the lockdown has done is to place people into a liquidity position that just seems completely unacceptable. So you've cut off for kind of understandable reasons, you've cut off the ability of someone to go out and kind of earn their livelihood. And I think most of the workers who work in the informal, who work in the informal economy, have to kind of have access to a site, kind of access to waste, access to a street corner, to be able to earn the kind of income that they earn on a day-to-day basis. What we know about these types of activities is that people don't have spare cash like we would think of in a larger enterprise. You have a much greater deal of a much greater amount of working capital. In the informal economy, it's a day-to-day kind of activity, and what the impact of the lockdown has been is to basically stop the ability of those who kind of need to earn the income that they need to earn on a day-to-day basis. I mean, it does seem to me that as a society, there's a deeply moral question that places us in. because the kind of shutdown places workers in the informal economy in a what I think is a pretty possible moral dilemma. So the kind of dilemma is kind of either that you would choose to starve, or your family would starve, or else you have to break the law and kind of break the conditions of the lockdown, and in that way you placing your own health plus the health of the whole of the society into jeopardy. And it seems to me like a kind of pretty possible dilemma to place someone under, and the kind of argument for some income replacement scheme is kind of pretty clear to solve that dilemma. I think there's a second issue too, which has been playing out, which is a question about how we define the regulations and kind of how we understand the kind of economy, and how we understand what it is to do and what it is to do an essential service. And I think you see all of the bias that goes to the formal sector playing out in the way that the regulations are being dealt with. So kind of if you work in the waste sector but you're in the formal sector, then it seems to me you're kind of allowed you kind of allowed to work. But if you do exactly the same activity but you do it in the informal economy, then for some reason that doesn't seem to fall inside the definitions of the regulations. So I think those, for me, are the two key issues about how we should think about the problem.
One of the things that's interesting and troubling is that only is a relatively tiny part of the economy as a whole, somewhere between 7 and 11 or 12% of the economy. A very large number of people are actually dependent for their livelihoods on that sector. And at the same time, one of the things that's been really interesting about the situation is that it's revealed how invisible the informal sector is to many members of the South African public, but also to policymakers. This indeed is one of the reasons why we've tried to launch this webinar, because we think it's very important for people to become aware of what actually are the issues that people in the informal sector are facing. Luyanda Hlatswayo is the director, or one of the executive members of African Reclaimers organization representing waste pickers in the Soweto area. Luyanda, can you speak to us about the concrete realities that you and your members have been facing in this time of the coronavirus? Luyanda, are you there? Can you hear us? There seems to be a problem with Luyanda's technology. We're going to continue to try to assist him offline with getting his computer working. One of the key things that is absolutely central in this crisis is cash. And one of the central things that have become revealed as we looked at this crisis is that although in real terms what we're experiencing is a crisis of food security, in many ways the crisis of food security in South Africa and the crisis of the informal economy is a crisis about cash. It's about money. It's about people having the ability to get hold of the food that is there on the supermarket shelves and even on the spaza shelves. And that's one of the reasons why the recent announcements from President Cyril Ramaphosa about increases in the child support grant and even the possibility or the reality of a special COVID-19 relief of distress grant is so important. One of the people who's been campaigning very hard for this is Lynette Maart from the Black Sash. Lynette, can you give us your responses to these recent announcements, and also your sense of to what extent will this help resolve the issues faced by people in the informal economy, and what do you think are the concrete challenges that still lie ahead in terms of implementing this?
Thank you very much, Andries, for this opportunity. Let me just take it a step back. So the informal economy, I think according to PLAAS, there are about 5.5 million people that work in that economy. And I'm going to use just two examples to demonstrate the issue of labor in the informal economy, and then flip it over into social grants and a basic income grant. So let's take the example of a domestic worker. A domestic worker might have, whether she's registered with the Domestic Workers Union or not, she might have a job for 2 days a week. And that's not sufficient income to feed the mother with her 3 or 4 children. So she would get a child support grant because there's a means test, and that means test would mean that she would earn under a certain amount per month. But for those other months, the child support grant is actually a very important mechanism to carry the household. So if we take that and say, for example, she works for 1 person or 2 persons, but none of those people have registered her for the UIF, it means that in this period, that loss of income and opportunity cannot be converted into a currency of UIF, because UIF is the criteria is that you have to be full-time employed. There's a certain number of hours, and somebody must have fired you from your job. So you can't easily get into that UIF basket. I mean, for none of the unemployed people in the informal economy, many cannot access the UIF relief. The same with farm workers. There's lots of farm women who are employed seasonally or casually, and sometimes they're not on formal payrolls or etc. And for the farm workers, the child support grant, if they have children, would help. If you do not have children, you are in a really, really invidious position. So let's come to the issue of the grants and the packages that has been announced by Cyril Ramaphosa most recently. So let me just take you back, and then so there's been an increase of 250 Rand on all the grants, and a 500 Rand increase on the child support grant. And we've been asking SASSA in more detail about what that means. So these top-ups, in a sense, will ensure that 18 million grant beneficiaries are not plunged into starvation whilst they are in dealing with the pandemic and in lockdown. And so our response from SASSA to that 500 Rand, so they say in June, that 500 Rand will actually be converted into a caregiver's grant. So in any way, you will get your child support grant of 445 Rand that will be deposited into the caregiver's account. But I'm also an unemployed mother now during this, and I'm being precariously employed, and I can't get access to the UIF, so I will get that 500 Rand. And then there is also the rollout of the temporary COVID grant, social relief of distress grant, and that's for people with no income. So we're saying that this intervention is a significant one, but we are arguing that parents who are unemployed should also be getting this particular grant, and we are already seeing that the amount that they are punting is like 350 Rand. That's very little if SASSA distribute a food parcel, that food parcel is in the range of 1,000 to 1,200 rand. And so we are asking that that grant be increased at least to 1,000 rand to make people survive this period. Now we know that South Africa has a structural unemployment problem, and the economy is unable to absorb all the unemployed people in the foreseeable future. In fact, the Reserve Bank in its presentation said that there will be, in fact, a minus growth of between 5.6%, which means that we will lose jobs. And that's just understanding the formal economy. There's an estimate doing the rounds of 1.6 million people losing jobs during this period. It's anticipated. But we are also concerned that this COVID grant, in particular the temporary COVID grant, we are thinking that it's a step it's the first step to a basic income grant for those between the ages of 18 to 59. Now, South Africa has signed the United Nations, what they call International Covenant of Economic, Cultural and Social Rights. And in the recommendation to the country in 2017, they have said that South Africa must put in place by this time, or 2020 in October, 31st of October, plans for people who have no social assistance that are between the ages of 18 to 59. And South Africa has to report in October on what it has done to implement that. So we're seeing that if the government takes this seriously and it flips into a permanent grant, it can at least address that recommendation. Now, we're also saying that when you are implementing these grants, one of the problems is that the grant beneficiaries are given onerous criteria and administrative burden to get this very little money. And so we're saying there should be basic documents like an ID, documents that's required for refugees or permanent residents, contact details, and then a bank account. And there are a mechanism for people who have no IDs or have lost their IDs. It's called Regulation 11, so they can follow that. But we're saying that SASSA must use the current databases from entities such as the Home Affairs, the Unemployment Fund, the South African Revenue Service, and NSFAS, the National Student Financial Scheme, so that the cost of providing supporting paperwork and being sent from pillar to post is really reduced to a minimum, and that there's a recourse mechanism. We also are saying that at the moment, the Banking Association of South Africa, who's representing the commercial banks, are saying that they are waiving bank fees for social grant beneficiaries. And this is to ensure our understanding that the grant beneficiaries get the full cash value of the grant. And we hope that this will become a permanent feature of the South African landscape and part of the responsibilities of the South African or of BASA. And I think that the other issue here is that often monies get put into bank accounts. The bank accounts are structured in such a way that you have debit orders and other mechanisms to take money out of the account. We saw in the United States of America when they gave people that $1,200 as part of the relief. The minute the money went into the bank account, debt collectors and banks were taking the money for prescribed debt and other loans that beneficiaries got themselves into. And we want to really, in the implementation, avoid those things, because it will make for for a lot of hardship. There are other things that I think one of the issues that government are also saying that it will implement a voucher and cash transfer technology for food assistance. It has bandied the idea of 250,000 food parcels that can be delivered over 14 days. The problem that we have seen with food parcels, the corruption in the food parcel distribution networks, the fact that the food are not of good quality with all sorts of gochas in it and etc. There is an issue around who will qualify for these food parcels and what's being built into the mechanisms to ensure that it reaches the right people and that the food are of high quality, etc. We know that there are people that might not have bank accounts, that might not have IDs, that have to still get food parcels. We understand that, but the criteria must be very clear, and so must be the procedure. I think I will end there. If there's maybe questions, then I can come back to those. Thank you.
Thank you for that very detailed summary of some of the practical and policy issues relating to the ramping up of social grants. Luyanda, it's good to have you back. I'm sorry about the technical problems you've been having. We wanted to just get a picture from you just about why is all this necessary? What are the problems and challenges facing people who are living at the very margins of our economy, trying to make things eat? For example, as your members are in the waste picking and reclaiming industry. Could you just take us through some of the biggest impacts you've seen, and also what you think is needed? Child grants, help, but what are the other measures that are necessary?
Hi, Andries. Hi, everyone. Sorry for the bad network. I'll try and sum it up as quickly as possible. I think the first thing is about recognition. The actual reclaimers are not recognized. I'll make an example with the reclaimers. Why I'm saying that, on the ground, as we are organizing and as we are engaging with government, as we are engaging with the private sector in finding ways and helping the people in distress, we're finding problems that the definition of a reclaimer is not the same as in different spheres. For us, a reclaimer is a person that wakes up at 3 o'clock in the morning and goes to work and doesn't have any formal acknowledgement. Now, the city of Johannesburg, for example, recognizes a reclaimer as a person that has an ID document incubated in some form of system, where that could be separation of source, that has a cooperative. So from what we have observed, 80% of reclaimers in South Africa are foreign nationals, and they do not have ID document, and most of them are in the recycling industry. What's going to happen to them? Because they are not included in the waste management systems. They are not included in the city's database. We are finding ourselves in situations where our members are going to organize and they find 3,000 reclaimers, and the city only finds 400 reclaimers. So what's it goes directly to the grant system. Who is going to be eligible for those grants? Are we going to look at the ID? Are we going to look at who's a South African, who's not a South African? Are we going to look at who's working under a cooperative? Or are we going to look at, are these people workers? I think that if we need to clarify that on policies first, there's a lot of problems that are within the informal sector, not just on the recycling part of it. I'm just making examples of recycling because I'm very familiar with it. The issue of PPE. We've been complaining about protective gear for more than 4 years. We've been asking the city to give us sanitizers for the past 4 years. Reclaimers have been asking for these things for many years. The problem is, right now, the pandemic that is happening, the virus is affecting everyone. Reclaimers have been suffering from a virus of not being recognized. Taxi drivers have been going through a virus of not being recognized. So what's changing it now? because now it's affecting everyone. That is why everyone is jumping. The first people that were supposed to be getting PPEs, for example, are the community healthcare workers, and we are putting them in front line right now against the war and not even arming them with PPEs. So we need, before we can even think about doing grant funding, we need to go back to policies and say, who are going to be the beneficiaries? Who is a reclaimer? What value does a taxi driver put in? We need to start from the basis of what are we looking at in terms of the problems. We can't just solve a temporary problem right now. Reclaimers are not being recognized as essential services. People are not able to work. Only 20% out of my mind are going to be recognized as reclaimers. What's going to happen afterwards? We are seeing that problem with councillors, where when we have to deliver food parcels, where you find a certain number of food parcels have to be dedicated for a certain councillor because they have to give their people. Now that's 100 food parcels that are going where we don't know they are going. That's 100 food parcels that there's 100 people that are not going to have food for that day, and it's going to be reserved for other people. That is the problem that we are facing on the ground. The major problem, besides the grants and everything, is the education part of it. It's difficult for me to connect to you. I'm in an informal settlement. Power is very difficult to get, which is a bigger problem. When the country was going on a lockdown, most of the people in the informal settlements didn't even know what Corona was. It was shocking. It was shocking for the fact that organizations would come and deliver food and not deliver sanitizers, and people wouldn't see a problem with that. People are not educated on the system what's happening. People are going on lockdown because they see soldiers coming around. I think we need to clarify the bigger problems. Government cannot be able to do all these things on themselves. They cannot continue making decisions without consulting with the people that are relevant, because we end up being the ones that get hurt at the end of the day, whilst people are busy campaigning on a difficult situation that people are staying in. The community that I'm in right now is a community of close to 400 people. Not even one person understands what a mask, the necessity of a mask is. We are all wearing them. People are thinking it's a fashion style. They're seeing these COVID-19 things. They're reading the, but people don't understand the complexity of it. Yes, we all were not ready. There's no one that said was ready for this. We're not gonna put blame on the government completely, but we are saying for us to be able to get out of this, government needs to properly engage with the organizations that have been on the ground and have been organizing informal workers for more than 20 years, and they know what's best. It took us as reclaimers, as a reclaiming organization, 2 days to respond immediately when the country was on shutdown. It took the government even much longer.
Thank you, Luyanda. Very many interesting and important points you're making. Me, as I was listening to you, I was reminding myself of the statement in the preamble to the South African Constitution, which is that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. And unfortunately, we have a situation where South Africa may belong to all who live in it, but there are very large sections of society that are invisible to our official systems, invisible because they are informal, invisible because they are foreigners. And at the same time, the reality is that while people may be invisible to government and its systems, they're not invisible to the coronavirus. And every person who is not being taken care of economically is therefore pushed to go hustle for food, to push to enter into interaction with others, exposing themselves to risk, and thereby also exposing others to risk, and having to make very, very difficult moral choices, as you said, Imraan, to resolve those issues simply in order to stay alive. You've said many, many interesting and important issues, but I think there are many pressing questions coming in from our listeners. Let me just see. Esti, can you put one of the questions from our listeners up on the screen so that Imraan and Lynette and possibly Luyanda can respond to them as well? So from Mandla Kamlana, the question is directed at Lynette. What is it that that's informing the time frame of 6 months for the monetary relief? That's a really relevant question, because if you look at the plans for the return of the economy, it's very likely that we're going to be in some form of lockdown well beyond the next 6 months time frame.
Just get to my thing. Sorry, I just need to unmute myself. Right, can you hear me? Okay, right. Perhaps just to say, I think the projections at the moment seem to be focusing on first curbing the virus, and so it's about lockdown, but it will take a little bit of a while for the economy to actually kickstart again, and globally people are struggling to get to grips with when exactly do you transition to some kind of a normality, so that the virus don't return with more in a vicious form. So that's one yardstick. But I think that the second one is nobody knows how long it will take for the economy to recover. So we might just come back in 6 months' time and realize, oops, it hasn't moved at all. And so government might have to fork out even more money. So I don't think that anybody has a clear understanding of how long it will take. In fact, I mean, if one were to be honest, unless we have a cure, which is being developed at the moment, and everybody is saying it will take between a year and 18 months to get some cure, provided that it follows all the tests, that then we will be completely safe from this virus. But for now, the only containment is really practicing safe social distancing and all these cleaning regimes that we have to follow. So I think it's just a projection, a temporary projection. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynette. Imraan, do you want to respond to that question? And there's also a question from the Landless People's Movement. What is the debt to GDP projections of the 500 billion rand stimulus package? That becomes a pressing question, particularly if we're looking at a long lockdown period or an extended lockdown period.
Yeah, so let me deal with the period first. I mean, this is not my kind of area of expertise, but from what the people who are modeling out what the possible trajectory of the infections would be, my kind of understanding is that one kind of reasonable scenario is that the numbers of infections will peak sometime at the end of August, early September, and that we sort of going to require different types of measures to deal with that problem. And many of you have probably seen the five phases approach that's been circulating. So I think from what I can gather from the medical experts, I think the sense is that we're kind of going to have these problems for at least the next 6 months, if not more. And I think the 6 months thinking around the package that the president announced is kind of related to those questions. I think Lynette's point's fair. I mean, we kind of probably have this for kind of at least 2 years. So I think the kind of economy is going to take some time to get back to some level of normality. On the debt to kind of GDP kind of issue, I think there's a few kind of questions here, a few numbers that need to be crunched. So on the one hand, you've got the kind of increase in expenditure that's coming from the stimulus package. So from the announcement of the president, we know that there's that of the 500 billion, 130 billion is coming from reprioritization of come off the budget. So the balance of that, the 370 billion would have to be raised, and that's going to impact on on the debt issue. The other thing to bring into the calculation is the fact that it's quite clear that the amount government collects from taxes is going to go down quite substantially. So if you think about VAT calculations, taxes that we collect from excises, from tobacco, alcohol, etc., all of those are going to go down quite. That government's not going to collect as much as it does. So if you put all of that together, then the debt to GDP ratio is going to go up. The best estimates that I've seen of that is something around 17.5% to 18%, which is quite a substantial increase from where we were, which was about 11%.
Thank you. Then there was a question as well from one of our listeners about how much is actually going to households here, and particularly, is this increase of 500 per child, or is it just per caregiver? There seems to be quite a lot of unclarity about it at present.
Thank you. Let me just explain the child support grant issue again. Currently, there are about over 12 million children who receive an amount of 445 Rand per month from government. Now, the recommendations that was announced by, or the proposals that were announced by President Ramaphosa was that for May, the child support grant will be increased by 300 Rand. That's only for May. And then for June and up until the rest of the 6-month period, the grant there will then be 500 Rand that is put into the same bank, because children can't receive their money. Caregivers receive the money on behalf of them. And from June, there will be the 445 Rand for the child, but there will also be a 500 Rand that accrues to the caregiver. And that's what we've understand. We're still questioning at the moment whether that 500 Rand should not be equivalent also or given to those who are getting the temporary corona or COVID virus grant as well. There's a discrepancy there at the moment.
Just from Luke Midlerkamp, really about the economic impacts of cash transfers. One of the things that we've seen in recent years is that the supermarkets are opening branches in the informal settlements in the townships. Essentially what's happening is that ShopRite and Pick n Pay are chasing the social grants. Which is good if you have some money to spend in the supermarkets, but at the same time, we're destroying local vendors' livelihoods and sucking money out of those local communities. So the question is really what are the measures that are needed to ensure that money circulates in the local community and that we have a positive knock-on for localized spending in those economies. That's a question for both of you. The question is directed at Lynette, but I'm quite sure, Imraan, that you have answers to that as well.
Yeah. Let me start and say, look, South Africa has got a very good social grant system, and part of why we can distribute to so many people is that we use cash transfers via bank accounts. And what's happened was that we had a sort of a pay point system where people could collect their grants. But in the transition, some of those pay points have actually been closed. The pay points were reduced from 10,000 pay points across the country to 1,740. And even in this period, SASSA is saying that, I mean, in the report that they delivered to the Portfolio Committee today, they said that only 500,000 people had collected grants at pay points, but that's because of lockdowns and all sorts of other things. So that's the first thing of just setting the scene. A lot of people throw their monies at retailers because there's provision. SASSA pay retailers or the South African Post Office for that special disbursement account where they can benefit from free withdrawals and bank charges from retailers. They also used, a lot of grant beneficiaries use ATMs to draw their money. That's in there's 61% of the total, just over 11 million people who receive the grants on behalf of the 18 that use ATMs. And then there's only 5% that use the South African Post Office, even though the special disbursement account belong to the Post Office and has been constructed by them and SASSA, which protect the money of grant beneficiaries. So this problem that I was talking about of money being taken out of the bank account, that account is protected. Now let's go back to this issue of the retailers. I mean, there are signed agreements or agreements between not signed agreements, but agreements, understandings between the Post Office and between SASSA with about 5 of these retailers. Now, the Post Office did speak about opening it up to spaza shops and all sorts of other localized participants. But there are 2 problems in rural areas if you want to use the National Payment System network. First of all, the national payment infrastructure, to which everybody subscribes to, banks, retailers, etc., doesn't work too well in the rural areas. It's often unstable, interconnectivity is an issue, data is an issue. They run short of cash. There's only one ATM that sometimes operates, and for months or for weeks, there's no cash. They need to get technicians, etc., etc. We've experienced all of that within the system. And I think the removal of the pay points, where local traders could come and bring wares and so on, is really still a sore point, and something that the Black Sash has been trying to get SASSA to shift to, particularly for the rural areas. And they started to open some of the pay points, but the conditions have changed in the Corona days. So there is a challenge at the moment around the money of social grants reaching the local economic participants. And that is something that needs to be worked at. That list of where people can draw their money and the IT infrastructure or whatever that can reach those people. I mean, there's also an issue in the banks. Often they refer to a cashless society, which is problematic because you get onto a taxi and you need to pay. You get onto a local shop and you need to buy bread, you need money. So there's that broader thing of moving away from cash, but that will marginalize even more people. That's my response for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynette. Imraan, do you have thoughts on this? Unfortunately, I would have liked to have Luyanda to speak to the matter as well, but we've lost him again. Imraan, the importance of the informal, the cash grant to the informal economy, and the informal economy as a source of livelihoods and multipliers, as economists like to refer to them.
Yeah, I think that's part of the stimulus package is to be able to kind of boost demand in kind of critical areas such as the informal economy. So I kind of do think that that the package creates the sort of possibilities for people in the informal economy to get access to that demand. I think a key part of what government has to do is to make sure that the cash that is going to households is kind of spent in the informal economy as well. And I think actions by the big retailers to try to muscle out informal operators, I think it is kind of something that we should really be kind of aware of, and those things should be tackled through kind of institutions such as the competition kind of authorities. Just one of the questions was on this kind of issue of the of cash grants versus food parcels. I think ordinarily I would be a kind of strong supporter of cash grants, because you're giving money to people and they can make the decisions about how best to spend it. I think in the situation we're in, you kind of need both, because I think the problem is, whatever the measures, I think we have to be clear that they're not going to get to all of the households. So, lots of the CSG increase was based on the idea that you want to get money into households who've lost kind of income from the informal, from the informal economy activities. It is true that the CSG is a good way to get money in, into those households, but the coverage is something around 80%. So there's still 20% of households that are not going to get that money coming in through the child support grant. And then there's all sorts of issues around intra-household things. How do households actually share that income and so on. And I think we're in such a complex situation that in this case, I think we need both the grants and the food parcels. There's also the question about how much the grants are and kind of how much of food can you buy with it. My sense is that those parcels actually deliver a lot more food than what you can buy for these grants. I think there's a few trade-offs to think about, and in this situation we need them both. I'm really kind of sorry, Andries, I have to join another thing, so I'm going to have to opt out now.
Thank you, Imraan, and we are about to wrap up anyway in the next few minutes. I did, however, so thank you very much for your contribution. It was really useful to get these insights. But before we end, I'd like to go to Luyanda, if we can. Luyanda, we've been talking about the importance of the informal economy as a source of livelihoods and why it is desirable. You can have a situation where you could have a situation in which money gets to people via the child grant, then they go to ShopRite or Pick n Pay, and the money just leaves the local community as well. And we wanted to hear your thoughts about the importance of keeping money circulating within poor communities. Do you have any thoughts for us on that matter?
Can you just please repeat the first part of your question? I didn't hear properly.
The economic importance of the informal economy, as a way of circulating money in the local community. Can you talk to just how important for example, waste pickers? What is their role in just being part of the informal economy in this settlement where you were?
Yeah. I think it's very wide. and for most of the residents, for example, the residents in Johannesburg CBD, most of them are your ladies that are selling bananas on the streets. It's a huge space where 10 rand can go around the whole month without even reaching the bank. It's a very flexible working system. And I see in many other communities, the flow of money is still going. As much as shops are still closed, but it goes back to the point of working back with the organizations at the bottom, because we can make the assumptions of a lockdown on the level of politicians and on the level of the elite class is different to the lockdown to the people at the bottom of the food chain, because shops are not closed. Trust me. That's why I'm saying we need to have proper engagement with the people on the ground. Municipalities are very different in terms of keeping the money moving around. I think it goes back to the what's the main purpose? Is it because of the economic? Is it because of want to keep our economy running, or do you want to keep on feeding people? Because if we don't continue feeding people, people will still find a way of making money, and that the whole system can still be created without the government. To be honest, the people that are selling, they're no longer selling the former way that people are still the normal way that we've been selling. People are still continuing to trade in an informal way. That's why it's an informal sector. You can't formalize without engaging with the informal sector. It's like waste pickers. You tell waste pickers that don't ever go into that street because we've got special bins. There's a truck that's coming to collect the reclaimers will go exactly there. So I think it all boils down to engaging with the people on the ground. You cannot make decisions about livelihoods of people and not engage with them. The importance of us making sure that the people are comfortable with the decisions that are making. That is the most important thing that we need to deal with.
Thank you, Luyanda, and you're right at the end. You've really raised some of the broader political questions that we're facing of the need to the question about the legitimacy and the validity of public authority in our informal economy. And you're really asking really crucial questions about how our state is operating in the situation. To what extent is it taking people along? We certainly hope to touch on those issues in subsequent editions of this webinar. We don't know how long we're all going to be in this lockdown space. We will be back next Thursday, possibly looking at these kinds of questions of the nature of public authority, or alternatively, we may be able to bring you a special episode on the situation of farm workers, people who work in our formal and informal food system, an absolutely vital and critical issue. But for now, I really want to thank all of you. Thank you, Luyanda and Lynette, for making time. Thank you, listeners and viewers, for participating and for your questions. I'm sorry that we couldn't get to all of your questions this time. We started a little bit late. Stay well, stay healthy, keep your spirits up, and wash your hands. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.